The Honourable Member for Dartmouth, Harbour.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm pleased to speak today on this motion that was brought forward by my colleague and friend from Halifax West, and I want to commend him. He has a particular interest in this. He's long been interested in post-secondary education and has been a champion of it. He now has, I know, one daughter who's going through it at great expense, and he's got more on the way, so he might have a particular interest. The biggest challenge we face domestically, I believe, Mr. Speaker, is the issue of productivity. And when you talk about productivity, you have to talk about human resources and human capital, as my colleague from Halifax West spoke earlier. We have to talk about education. And most Canadians would say, yes, if you're going to talk about productivity in Canada, you should talk about education. But surprisingly, the government didn't in the speech from the throne. And I'd like to just read the entire part of the speech from the throne that dealt with education. This is quite staggering. Families worry about the rising costs of higher education. That's it. No answer, no further comment. Well, Mr. Speaker, that's hardly startling information. C-284 would be a very effective way to deal with that. It would be a very good start for helping Canadians who need help the most. In supporting this bill, the Canadian Federation of Students, Amanda Aziz, who's a very effective advocate for post-secondary education, said, "The research is clear, low-income students are underrepresented in Canada's universities." Now, Mr. Speaker, one would hardly think you could argue with that. All the evidence indicates that low-income persons, persons with disabilities, and Aboriginal Canadians are those who don't get to take part in the richness of Canada because they don't have the opportunity, the access to opportunity of education. Canada Access Grants is a great program. The problem is it only extends to 1 year. And of course, this grant, this piece of legislation would have extended those grants to all 4 years. Persistence, that being the ability of students, once they're in university, to stay in university, is a big issue for low-income Canadians. This bill would have helped that immeasurably. And so, Mr. Speaker, this is not the first time we've had the opportunity to actually do something for the Canadians who need it the most. And the response of the government was to refuse a royal recommendation to this bill, to not want to do anything about it. And, Mr. Speaker, that is a shame. Instead, what we see from the government is tax changes, tinkering with the tax system. I'd like to quote the Canadian Federation of Students again, who say, "The net benefit for a student enrolled full-time for 8 months under the textbook tax credit that the Conservatives introduced would be a mere $80, less than the cost of one textbook per academic year," and that's supposed to be an education initiative. Not much, Mr. Speaker. George Sewell, the national chairperson in 2006 of CFS, said, "Tinkering around the edges of the tax system is not going to increase access to colleges or universities." And, Mr. Speaker, that's really what we need to do in Canada, is we have to find a way so that the entire nation can benefit economically. But from a social justice point of view, we provide opportunity Canadians so they can maximize their human resource potential. And surely that is an admirable goal that we would all support. So if the government is not going to allow 284 in its original form to be adopted, let me at least make a couple of recommendations tied in with that would make sense. Student debt has unquestionably gotten higher in the last 15 to 20 years. It's kind of gotten out of control for many Canadians. Even though the federal government introduced programs like the Millennium Scholarship, Canada Access Grants, and other learning bonds, and a whole host of other initiatives for students, student debt has risen. Now that we are in a time of surplus, a time of great wealth, we should be looking to assist students. The hundreds of thousands, if not millions, of Canadian students who are coming out of university with huge debt and facing an inability to deal with that debt, at the same time trying to start their career, maybe buy their first home and get married, even buy a car when you already owe $25,000, $35,000, $40,000, i.e. a small mortgage without a home. It's hard to even think about investing in other things. So I think the government should take a realistic look at student loan. We are not a country that can afford to take that many chances. We've been a great nation. We've educated our people very well. We're now facing huge challenges. China and India, Brazil, all the emerging nations of the world are investing in post-secondary education. Canada's done well in the OECD rankings, but we're getting warnings from them that we're not doing as well as some of the European nations in investing in our students. The most important thing we can do to improve productivity in Canada is invest in Canadians. The most important way to invest in Canadians is to invest in equality of opportunity for all Canadians. The way to invest in equality for opportunity for all Canadians is the bill that my colleague from Halifax West brought in, and to reinvest in programs like the Millennium Scholarship Foundations, so that not only economically for the nation, but socially for every Canadian, education becomes the priority that it should be and isn't under this government. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Resuming debate, the honourable member for Niagara West, Glanbrook.
I want to thank you for the opportunity to speak today on Bill C-284. I look forward to the opportunity to speak about our government's record, especially when it comes to education and students. And certainly over this past 20 short months, our government has stood up for post-secondary education and for all Canadian students. And what we have done is really what we're talking about. As my colleague from Blackstrap mentioned a few moments ago, this government has brought forward a plan called Advantage Canada. I would say under the Minister of Finance, that is what is important. I know that as we move forward on these issues of education, it's important to move forward with a master plan, if you will, a plan that will address all issues, and a plan that will take Canada in the right direction. I think it's fair to say, and I think we should say it for the record, there were many years of Liberal cuts and inaction on this file, and I believe that an ad hoc proposal and really no cohesive vision for post-secondary education presents a challenge when we have a strategic plan that will help us get where we're heading. We believe that all students that want to attend university and have shown that they will work hard, study and do well deserve the chance to go, regardless of how much money their parents make. Mr. Speaker, it is no great secret that the previous Liberal government cut more than $25 billion from the Canadian social transfer to the provinces and the territories that pays for things such as post-secondary education. They cut $25 billion, and now they claim to realize that education is important in Canada, that they know how to assist students with their education, and now they suddenly have found answers they didn't have before. But I think Canadians do know better. Canadians know that this government has been working to restore the funding that the previous government cut. Canadians know that this government is making meaningful investments in post-secondary education by investing more than $8.4 billion this fiscal year through transfers, direct spending, and tax measures. They've invested over $800 million more per year for post-secondary education through transfers to the provinces. This represents a 40% increase in a single year. We are also providing $1 billion to provincial and territorial governments through the Infrastructure Trust Fund to rebuild and renovate campuses across the country. I think it's important to note that for many years there has been crumbling infrastructure around this country, and I believe that that $1 billion will go a long way to providing what is necessary in terms of spaces, in terms of infrastructure on college and university campuses. Mr. Speaker, under the previous Liberal government, tuition skyrocketed and attendance stagnated and infrastructure crumbled, and we are working to fix these problems. That is why this government announced a long overdue review of the student loan regime in Budget 2007. This review will be completed shortly, and with the results will be announced in Budget 2008. And as my friend from Blackstrap stated earlier, it is important that the Minister and the House have time to examine this review before changes are made to such an important program. Unfortunately, this bill does not help this government achieve the goals of a stronger, more accessible post-secondary education system, and that is why I will be voting against it. Mr. Speaker, as all members in this House know, it is the responsibility of the provinces and the territories that want to take part in this program to do the groundwork, and I believe my Bloc colleague mentioned that, and to implement this program to deliver it to students. Yet, that has been one of the challenges with this bill, is the lack of consultation with the provinces and the ability for them to get on side to support this initiative. I know that during the committee process, there wasn't a single province that came forward that was supportive of this particular bill. Not that they would not be supportive of more money if they didn't have to be accountable for how it was spent, but they were not ready to implement this bill and wouldn't be ready to implement it for several years. So the province have been asked, and I believe that the response that we've got from the provinces is that at this point in time they are not in support of this bill. I certainly appreciate the private members' bills cannot be expected to be perfect in every sense, but certainly we don't want to look at taking money out of provinces such as Quebec and the territories to pay for this program. a program that every single province has indicated to us they are not in support of. Mr. Speaker, these are not the only problems with this bill, but adopting these proposals would certainly severely limit the flexibility of the government to make timely changes to the programs when the need arises. And I believe that it's important that we look at a framework, as we have with this Minister of Finance and Advantage Canada, that we look at this thing holistically, that we look at how we can move forward and be more productive as Canadians. We realize that education is important, and certainly the future of Canadian students is very important, and why we need to make sure that all the money and all the tools that we have are available to them.